And 3 and 2 and 1. Sean, welcome to episode 2 of Whisky Unscripted Season 3. Gordon Dundas. Big G, how are you?
Incredible. It's been an amazing weekend of, it's nearly the next weekend, but incredible weekend. I thought I'd catch up with all the other episodes of Whisky Unscripted over the weekend. I didn't really, but it's great to be on Season 3, Episode 2. We've got some guests.
Who's your pals? Who is your pals?
Well, we have Danielle and Dougie, who look after Scotland for Ian Macleod Distillers. Welcome to Whisky Unscripted.
Oh, I'm just gonna.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, good to be here.
Hey,
I'm gonna start already.
Noise.
Is that okay? I can start already.
Great,
fantastic.
Noise.
It's a special, as you hopefully you've read by the description, a special sort of retailing episodes, and we'll be hearing from a retailer later on. But these are the guys that are on the ground trying to sell our wonderful, beautiful Scotch whisky. But I think before we get into all that wheres and wherefores, Gordon, they've got the whisky going already.
They have. Well, I've known Danielle for a long time. She's always first off on the whisky trail. So, Danielle, what are you drinking?
Well, I have to say, I am a great lover of Islay because that's where my journey started, similar to yours, Gordon. And a Smokehead for me, I just love it.
Very good.
You know,
Very good.
That's me.
Nice bit of. Yeah, I'm a big Islay fan, as you know. Dougie, what have you got in your glass?
I've gone for a Tamdhu, right. Speyside whiskey, so Tamdhu 12-year-old. This whiskey means quite a lot to me. I used to sell it in a previous life before Ian Macleod Distillers bought it, and always liked the sherry cask matured whiskies. So yeah, I've got a Tamdhu 12-year-old here today.
Very nice, very nice. What have you got, Mr. Dallas?
Well, I've just got a little sample that I got from a whisky tasting kit, and I didn't realise you were going to do an Islay there, Danielle. I've got a Lagavulin 16.
Oh, that's a cracking
Lagavulin 16.
Nice.
That's an Islay icon. That is.
The only thing about that, I would say, I got a bottle for Christmas, and the next morning, I was still tasting the Lagavulin 16.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, it's only a small bottle. It's either a small bottle or I'm a very big person.
It's definitely the first option.
If you are listening to this on Spotify or iTunes, we are now filming it and we're recording it on Zoom. We've previously recorded it on an audio platform and put it out in audio. We just thought we'd like to see our guests. We'll have the video, so it's on YouTube. So if you're listening to this on your ears, you can go and watch what's happening on the Whisky Unscripted YouTube channel. Gordon, what are you drinking?
Well, we've got an Islay, we've got two Islas, we've got a Speyside. I've gone for a Lowland. I've gone for an Auchentoshan, which is a triple distilled Lowland. Again, a whiskey that I think Danielle, Dougie, and myself have worked for in the past. This is a great whiskey, actually. This is you can see on the bottle, bourbon and sherry married together. Quite a lot of sherry content in there. This is a travel retail whiskey, 43%, no age, but nice and rich. But one thing that made Auchentoshan very unique in the Scotch whisky industry, very high new make spirit strength, about 80+% alcohol, because it's triple distilled, which will obviously relate to us and Rosebank, which of course is up there. So great whiskey and some good friends that work at Auchentoshan. So a great whiskey, enjoying that. Fantastic.
Now, can I just say, to get this episode underway, you've all referred to the past where you've worked, and I believe that will be in a selling capacity, what you do now for Ian Macleod. So could I ask a little bit about your whisky journey and what you were referring to about working on the island of Islay and things like that? Start with Danielle first.
Okay. Yes, so before I was worked with Ian Macleod and Whisky, which I've been doing for 15 years. Oh. I actually used to be a croupier, and I worked in casinos all around the world. Did you know that?
I did know that, actually.
Did you?
I thought I recognised you, Daniel.
Lots of stories about mafiosa and money, and that's that. Listen, give me a couple more drams and we'll discuss that.
Whereabouts around the world did you work?
I worked in the cruise ships, so we went all around the Mediterranean, all around the Caribbean islands, transatlantic. I worked in Canada.
Is it as glamorous as it seems?
Yes and no. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're paid to see the world. You're paid to go around and go off on those islands. And you get, and of course, because you're there, maybe say you're in St. Bart's every Tuesday. So you get to know the best places to go, the best beaches, and obviously it's a wonderful way to experience it. But what I would say is 8.5 months I worked on the cruise ship. How many days off do you think I got?
Not many.
Not one.
Really?
Every day's a day off on that.
Wow.
Crikey.
So you do work hard. You do.
The Scotch whisky industry is better for holidays.
I love all this, though. It's very interesting. People's journey into whiskey, and I still don't think women are anywhere near incomparable to the men within the industry, but everyone's got their own journey in there, and 15 years is a long time to be in the industry, Danielle. So what took you off a ship and on dry land with whiskey?
So being Scottish, I was with my partner at the time. We were the only Scottish people on board. It was a big American cruise liner. And as they do, oh, you're from Scotland. And oh my goodness, you've got whiskey, you've got, your castle, you've got obviously, William and all the different historian figures. And do you actually like whiskey? And I'm very, very patriotic, very proud to be from, a working class city as Glasgow. And I was like, do I like whiskey? At that point, I wasn't drinking whiskey. So as you do in the cruise ship, I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy everybody a drink, go on to Scotland. And I became very patriotic and a very proud person I was that person you go on holiday and you see the Scottish person, they're like, go to Scotland. That was me. That was me.
Were you the kind of person that if you're in London and you pulled out a Scottish £5 note and you put it across to the guy, starts looking at it and you turn around and you go, that's legal tender?
I am that person that's like, what are you talking about? Why do you not? Scotland's amazing. So it was during, obviously, I worked there for 8 years all over the world, Palestine, Canada, everywhere, and got to wonderful, wonderful array of people. And my shoulders went back that wee bit further every time somebody said Scotland. Started to drink whiskey just to really prove a point, I think, of nothing else. And I was like, oh, I quite like this because I climb Munros and I talk about, wonderful countryside. And then it wasn't until I came back and there was an advert in the paper, and it was, do you fancy working in a rep company called at the time Fior Brands, which Gordon will remember. We were only around for 5 years. I took my chances and I went for an interview, and there was a Glasgow rep going at the time, and they said, well, why would you want to go into this? And I explained how I wanted to really learn more about whiskey because I just thought, God, we've got so much more here to give. And I started my journey on the cruise ships, and then I got a job with Fior Brands, which was Bowmore, Auchentoshan and Glengarry.
Wow.
And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, interesting.
Isn't it?
And we have other people that work currently at Ian Macleod who are also working for those brands as well. Alan Wardrop worked for them in the past, Stuart Thompson as well. And then obviously you were there it lasted about 5 years or so, didn't it?
It was exactly 5 years, and my very first training was with Jamie.
Mackenzie.
Jamie Mackenzie, who
I spoke to the other day on
Did
Zoom.
you? Oh, please tell me to ask him.
Jamie, if you listen, please. Hello.
Jamie and Ian McCallum, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And they took us across to Wylie, and that was my first big training, big adventure into, really understanding what a distillery was. And there, all of a sudden, was this wonderful, magical place where they all sound as if they're singing to you when they're talking, and their voice goes up and down, and it's so magical. And then
is it in Ireland?
It could be. You can imagine if a tourist was coming across and they were thinking, what language are they speaking? It's a wonderful language, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then on one side of the island, you had wild dolphins. The other side, you had wild seals and beautiful beaches. And then in the middle, there was all these people who were so passionate about this product called whiskey. And I was just like, oh, that's me, because I was passionate anyway about Scotland. And then to feel the love of these people, I was sold. It was sold.
That was it.
Yeah. That was
fantastic. We'll want to pick up about exactly when training transformed into actual work and feet in the ground, but we'll get to a sort of almost like the insider's guide. But Dougie, were you on the high seas? I thought you were maybe more of a pirate than a croupier.
Yeah, you're maybe not joking there, Gordon. No, in my younger days, basically, I came across whiskey through my rugby. I was lucky enough to play rugby at a fairly decent level, and
a fairly decent level.
Come on,
Dougie, how many caps for Scotland did you get? How many caps did you get?
Not enough, Gordon.
How many?
But basically, when I was involved with Scotland, we were sponsored by the famous Grouse whiskey, and it was basically, can you believe, through that you meet so many people through rugby that I got the opportunity to apply for a job with the company that owned Famous Grouse at the time. I had been a sales rep, so it was a natural progression maybe to go from what I had been into whiskey once I stopped playing rugby. So it was all through the people you meet through my sport, basically, that got me into that. So we're talking a long time ago. I had hair in those days, so we're talking the mid-90s when I actually started working in the whiskey industry. So
what a fine rugby player you were, sir. Just for those who maybe weren't on the planet at all at the weekend, Scotland did beat England at the weekend.
Yes.
Well done to Scotland. Anyway,
yes, just before we move on from that, because people, we've got, we're into a lot of countries across there. They've all got a connection to Scotch whisky or Scotland's, and it's many people's dream, he says, pointing to himself, to have represented your country at a sport. Can you remember the first time you did that? Because I think that would be just one of the greatest things you could have ever achieved.
Yeah, I was quite lucky in a way. I got in at a young age, Gordon. I was lucky enough to be on the bench for Scotland way back in the early 1980s. We played New Zealand, Scotland. We'd never beaten New Zealand, and we drew 25-all with them at Murrayfield in a game that we had a kick to win it, but unfortunately we just missed that. So way back 83. But my first actual game, I didn't actually get on that game. We played Australia the following year, and they had guys like David Campese, who's a well-known rugby player, playing, and unfortunately we came second that day. But travelled the world through it. Lucky enough to go on tour maybe for 11 years. And in fact, my first, if you like, drink of Famous Grouse when we were getting sponsored was on a tour of Japan, and they were very much into the highball drinks, which I think are making, which are I think are fantastic. Actually, I think a lot of whiskey should be drunk that and can be drunk that way. But that was way back in the late 80s, 89. We were in Japan, and I remember being in a restaurant and having these highball drinks. Fantastic, really good.
So, Dougie, when you were playing for Scotland, obviously rugby was not professional. So, what were you doing at that point to earn a crust? Yeah,
that was the issue. As I say, we all had jobs, and we literally had to have an employer that was good enough to give you a couple of days off at the end of every week to basically meet at Murrayfield on a Thursday and then go to wherever it was to play the game on the Saturday. So I was working in the sports industry at the time. I worked for a couple of different sports brands as a sales rep for Scotland, and it was difficult to combine both because sport was my passion, rugby was my passion at that time, and especially lucky enough being in the national team, I just wanted that to continue, and with all the travel and whatever else, it was something I really, really enjoyed. So I was fortunate to have employers that were fairly understanding, but it did come to I did in fact lose a job, unfortunately, through needing time off to go on tour, because in those days Scotland went on tour for maybe 6 weeks in the summer, so you had to have a very understanding employer. Yeah,
it was a big ask, wasn't it? Yeah. And then you get into whiskey mid-90s.
Yes, exactly that. Again, got the opportunity, as I say, through meeting people through the rugby. Was with Maxim Drinks Company, as we were called. They're now known as Edrington Beam Suntory. So I was there over 20 years, just as a sales guy, but covering loads of different areas in Scotland, which was fantastic, and getting to meet so many people. And then got the chance to join Ian Macleod Distillers about 3 years ago, and wow, fantastic! Love the company I'm with, and brilliant. Yeah.
And Danielle, how long have you been with Ian Macleod?
I'm the original. I'm here. This will be 10 years. 10 years, and I'll quickly tell you a wee story about that. I remember the first day, and I walked into the office, and I met Mr. Russell, Peter Russell, and he shook my hand, and he says, the only way you'll be leaving here, Danielle, is out in a box. Because people just don't leave Ian Macleod, because it's just such a really good company to work for. And I thought, well, that's a great thing that he said. And I'm still here. I'm not in a box, thank goodness, not yet.
Thank God for that.
10 years, and
fabulous. And it's absolutely true. I think we would all agree, working for a family business that is, that has that, you have that loyalty to them, they have that loyalty to you. You're not just a number. It really makes a big difference, and I think it reflects in everybody that works for us. And if you visit Glengoyne, you see it. And Gordon, obviously, your history is from the distillery as well, and you understand that sort of family element, don't you?
I was just about to say, just before I just jump in there, can I just unplug, if you're watching this, the reason this is called the sauna, because last year, one of the first lockdown tastings we did, I'd accidentally left the heater on and became redder and redder. And people said, why is he going red? Is he in a sauna? And why is he in a sauna? I've done the same right now. So I'm going to unplug the heater.
I think he's actually had a lot more Lagavulin than that.
Yeah, I think it's
Oh, that's roasting. But my question about families, and this gets us on to the sales and how you go about it, does being part of a family business, is that part of your language when you approach retailers?
For me, yeah, definitely. I think it's the fact we're a Scottish company as well. A lot of the bigger guys, dare I say, these days are maybe not owned, although obviously they've got Scottish brands, they're not owned by Scottish companies. I think it is quite a big thing these days. And I do like the fact that I think people are going more, let's buy local and support local and all that type of thing, especially, dare I say, during this pandemic. So I think it's fantastic. I use that a lot. The fact that we're a family-owned company, and the great thing is, it's not just that; it's the brands. It's the brands, guys, and I'm sure Danielle would totally agree with me. The brands that we're lucky enough to sell, have a great following, I believe, and I think the future's really, really bright for them. So yeah, all good.
Okay, so just an insider's guide, Gordon. This is an insider's guide to being a sales representative in Scotland. Danielle, what do you have to do in your first week, first month? If anybody's listening to this and thinking, I would love to get into the industry, how do you go about it? What's your day-to-day job?
Well, when I first joined with Ian Macleod, it was even more lackadaisical than it is now, if you can believe that, guys. And it was me, and I had two line managers who are also still there, Alan and Neil. And it was very much a case of, we don't have any point of sale, we don't have any real promotional strategies. So, right, Daniel, what do you want to do? Go out there and sell. So I wanted to further my knowledge, as I always think, is especially in the whiskey industry. I think you're going out there, you're selling a story as much as you're selling a liquid. Whiskey sold on, it's all about the stories, the history. We love a wee story in Glasgow as well. Love a wee chat. So I enrolled myself into John Lamon's course in the Good Spirits Company, and there was 12 of us at the time that went across, and we all did there. It was a 12-week course. It was every Thursday night, and it was a 3-hour. So that was the first thing. But because I knew, obviously, the Pot Still guys, the Murphy family, no relation to me, unfortunately, I also said to Frank one night, I said, Frank, I've just started in this role, because he knew me from Fior days, and I said, I really want to further my knowledge. We don't really have that much to give at Ian Macleod, but if the more knowledge I've got, the better. Can I come in and do a couple of shifts? I don't need paid. I promise I don't need paid. Can I just come in and work and listen to you guys? Because these are the guys that know the business. And I used to go in every second weekend and do the wee odd celebrity guest spot behind the Pot Still, and I did get paid.
And for those who've never been to Glasgow, there's a couple of great, and just from a Glasgow perspective, the Pot Still, owned by Frank, and I mean, fantastic knowledge of whiskey when you go in there, and they'll ask you the right questions to pour you the right whiskey, and they just want you to have a great experience. The Bon Accord, absolutely fantastic as well. Both of them are probably two of the best whiskey bars in Scotland. Edinburgh has many as well, but yeah, just to put a bit of context on that. Yeah.
So you had
the knowledge, Danielle. What's the day-to-day gig? What is it? How do you do it?
How do we do it? COVID or not COVID?
Let's start pre-COVID.
I know.
Oh gosh. So pre-COVID, yeah. So it's all about identifying, working with the guys that really want to work with you, because Dougie's right. We have such amazing brands out there, and it's all about finding the right home for our brands, really, as well. We have to, with anything, obviously price does come into it. Would be a fool to say it doesn't come into it, because at the end of the day, the retailers and obviously the on-trade, because Dougie and I both work with the hotels and the bars and the restaurants, and that's really exciting to be able to come up with a concrete plan just for them. So we have to work with them and identify who wants to work with us, and then it's a case of, right, well, we're going to meet in the middle, and we come up with some promotional mechanics, whether it be getting you guys in to host a dinner for us, or whether it will be doing a malt of the month kit, or getting our brands onto their menus and all sorts of different activation. But they've got to want to work with us, because there's only Dougie and myself that cover half of Scotland. We don't have time to chase down every single door out there. So it's got to be a meeting of minds, I would say. And as Dougie said, we're quite rightly so, because we're Scottish, we're independent, we're ticking a lot of boxes straight away.
And I think the other thing is that we're not none of our brands are massive brands either. So we don't have endless amounts of whiskey to sell very cheaply in loads of different places, which is why you don't find us in supermarkets and, all the sort of chain pubs, etc., etc. So that probably works well, if you know what I mean. Do you not think?
I do, but can I jump in as well, Gordon? I would just say, I think not promising what you can't deliver. Well, what I'm trying to say is, if you promise something to a bar owner or I don't know, public in a retailer, you must follow through. I think this trade in the old days certainly was one. People promised a lot and didn't deliver. So touch wood, I like to think that's what that we do at Ian Macleod. If we promise something, we'll follow through and we'll support that account. And hopefully on the back of that, they'll support you, because like anything in sales, you've got to go back and visit, not just the once, but you've got to go back again. So if you want them
to buy a second time, don't you? Totally. Yeah, and that even is slightly parallel to what I do and what we do, Gordon, is. I mean, I've been in a tasting with an ambassador from another whiskey company who was asked a question which was controversial, and he tried to blag his way through it, and he got found out, and it wasn't good. It's happened to me. I've just been very honest and said, I don't actually know the answer to that. I will find out and get back to you. And anybody in their right mind would go, well, that's fine. And that's the attitude you've got to take. You've got to build trust. You've got to build that sort of partnership and respect, I guess.
Yeah, and can I ask as well, for both of you, but start with Dougie, is it literally get the shoes on and knock doors, or are you travelling around in a car, and does your boot of the car, both of you have oodles and oodles of whiskey in the back of it? Have you get samples coming out your ear? I mean, physically, are you going round?
It's a good point. Literally, as Daniel said, I cover the east coast of Scotland. Danielle's on the west, and it's a case of we have a database of accounts that we have built up over the years by knowing people, and so it literally is a case of you're driving up in your car. The idea is not to get the buyer to come out to your car, because as you say, you have got samples in the boot, and once they see how much you've got, they're always wanting to, we'll just take that and we'll do this and we'll do that. But no, literally, it's trying to get around as many people as you can. That is the slight challenge, if I'm honest with you. The fact that just the two of us, and there's so many people wanting to. We can't deal with everybody, unfortunately, so we just don't have the time. But that's how we go about it. Literally, try to see as many people as we can per day, and getting them to support us. So yeah.
And the other thing I'm interested about, and I think this is true of a lot of distilleries, is you will have people which you might be trying to get over the line. You might be trying to make them sell them the sort of Glengoyne, range, and obviously taking people to our brand homes, to our distilleries, has a big impact on that. Would you say?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. And Dougie and Gordon's obviously been a part of this as well. There was something that I came up with based very much on that 2 years ago, maybe 2 years. How long have you been with the company? 3 years, Dougie?
Yeah, 3 years now, nearly done it.
Yeah, so 2.5 years ago, where you're absolutely right. Getting the people to any distillery, and everybody will know this, you're creating many brand ambassadors for your brand, and it's the best thing. And especially when you get to see it, smell it, touch it, you can explain it, and it's a magical thing. It's a smell for me every time I go into the distillery, and it just triggers that wee thing in your head. And I invented a thing called the Bartenders Program specifically for the category that Dougie and I work in, because you have to make it that little bit special. And don't get me wrong, you can go to Glengoyne and you'll have a wonderful experience, but these guys are looking for something that's going to match to food. You can put into cocktails. They also want to know that, have that knowledge. So why are you going to offer your customer a Glengoyne as opposed to a Glenlivet? What's the difference? So they have to know that, but it's got to be fun. We can't, whiskey, I think personally, gets quite a serious context sometimes, and we're trying to just get the guys up there, and we do a lot of smelling, we do tasting, we put a dinner involved, we get them mixing the cocktails, because people are very, especially the youth, they're quite shy about whiskey because they think it's this big complicated thing, and it
shouldn't be.
No,
absolutely. And even in our Glengoyne, we know, because through people like Gordon and the whole team there do such a great experience. Obviously not open at the moment, but from a visitor on a £10, £12 tour, it's a great experience. To a bartender or a specialist whiskey shop owner, on a half day, full day sort of experience, it makes such a difference to us. And I think Dougie also, when the other thing that I remember, a bit like Danielle, one of my first I worked in whiskey for about the same length of time as Danielle, but I worked for Whiskey Magazine, which sort of floated above this industry, and you used to get amazing tours of distilleries that nobody else got. And talking of Bowmore, I remember tasting whiskies out the straight, wandering around the warehouse with the team there taking whiskies out the cask, and it was just incredible. And we do offer that obviously at Glengoyne, and I think that's really important to ensure that you build those relationships.
Definitely. I concur with absolutely everything Danielle said there. I think the fact that Glengoyne is so accessible for, dare I say, the Central Belt. So a lot of my business I get is in Edinburgh, literally now in 20 minutes less maybe, and you're through at the distillery, so you can offer that. Which it's fantastic having that on your doorstep. And I miss those that program that Danielle put together. I miss them big time. I say I do. I'm sure the trade do as well. They're fantastic events. And the great thing is, once somebody's been on that, the word gets around in the trade, and people start asking about it. So hopefully they'll start buying our product if they want the chance to come on it next time.
And everything I've heard about that program, and I saw it in action, it was fabulous. And obviously we'll just talk about post or current situation in a minute, but I think there was a fine example earlier this week of how important it is when somebody goes to the distillery. And friend of the show, I have to say friend of the show, she's been on the show. I'm not sure she knows she's been on the show, but she has been on it. Joanna Lumley was starring with Gordon Dallas on ITV on Tuesday night just a few days ago. And Gordon, how's the? You must have had so many phone calls, offers of work.
Still going.
Are you replacing Philip Schofield next week?
I am. No, you've got to speak to Mr. Dundas. Yep. He's taking how much
percentage? I think he's replacing Holly Gordon.
Yes, it's always nice to have people rolling into distillery, and it was a wonderful programme. If you can get it, if you're listening to this and you're out with the UK, you might be able to get it on a streaming platform, but Home Sweet Home with Joanna Lumley, who is one of the national treasures of the country. A wonderful lady, really well respected across the industry, not just whiskey, I'm talking about the media industry, and she particularly wanted to visit Scotland and a distillery. But the producers were saying that they've done the tasting part before, but they got word of the smuggling story that they put together, and they mentioned to the director and Joanna, and they thought they must make time in the schedule, and they came. And if you watch the programme, you'll see Joanna getting this particular, in fact, it's the same skirt, Gordon. Look at this. There's the skirt.
That'll be on eBay soon.
And you never got it signed, Gordon. Oh, no.
I never thought of that. So that's the skirt Joanna Lumley put on, and she had the smuggling pouch, this one here, under her skirt on the programme on television. So that's what you can see there. So.
Yeah. Fabulous.
And can I just say, apart from Joanna Lumley, I love that bartenders programme you're talking about. One of the last ones we did, I was in Europe, Gordon, doing a tasting. You might remember this, Danielle. And my plane was delayed, and I'd at the airport said, "Don't worry, you get a dinner. I'll have dinner tonight at the distillery. I don't need anything." And the plane was delayed, and I'm looking at my watch, and I got off at Glasgow, and it literally was in the taxi. I says, "I don't care what speed you go, I need to be Glengoyne in 10 minutes." And the guy obviously kept to the speed limit. You were down the yard with the group, and I'd literally got out the taxi, handed my suitcase to, I think it was Jim.
To your butler.
And started the tour. I was like, get the food on, Danielle.
We were sweating, but you made
great fun.
You made it total professional to the end.
Those are the days, eh? Yeah.
I know. Hopefully they'll be back again. Gordon, can I pick you up? You just mentioned there about a specialist retail whiskey shop. You mentioned some selling into them. And we have got an interview with Kevin Moore. And Kevin, Danielle, was a chap that owns the Scottish Gantry. Now, you got me on to do a tasting, and I thought I'd follow him up with an interview, but just a quick word about Scottish Gantry and Kevin.
Yeah, fantastic. One of my customers, obviously over in Stirling was the original one. Very entrepreneurial, Kevin, and not afraid to take risks, which is great because it's the way we operate. We're very maverick in Ian Macleod, and I think that's why I'm still here 10 years later, which is a really nice way to work. So started off with those guys right at the start when they were growing their brand. and very much into provenance and independent companies like himself, and something that we can offer, which is fantastic, because not everybody wants to have the big brands in their shop. We want to have something a wee bit different, and that's actually where it works with Ian Macleod. Is we're not a massive brand, which we spoke about at the start. So for these little guys that have 1-2 shops, brilliant. And then he's now just opened up a shop in Milngavie, which is very close to the distillery. So watch the space for a bit of a partnership between obviously the one in Milngavie and Glengoyne, because it's so close. But Kevin, yeah, really good character, and very, very good to work with. And love to hear what you said.
Yes. Are we going to hear from Kevin now?
We are. I caught up with him last week, and I will, by the magic of technology, this finger, just hit this button, and we'll have that interview. This button, and we'll have that interview. Sorry, this button, and we'll have. I'm just joking. I'll cut that out. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined from Kevin Moore from Scottish Gantry. We're talking about selling whiskey, and I think this man will know quite a lot about it. Kevin, welcome to Whisky Unscripted.
Thanks, Gordon. Delighted to join you this afternoon.
Oh, it's late afternoon. The lights are on, and I've got a small glass in my hands.
Well, I've had to join you. So likewise, one of the benefits of working in a whisky shop is that you genuinely, on an almost daily basis, get to sample the delight. So it's great.
Oh, well, Slainthe, I'm having a legacy chapter 2 that Glengoyne.
Yeah, a cracking whisky. I'm having a Glengoyne 10-year-old. I think this is a lovely dram. Lovely starter dram.
Lovely to start, Kevin. And now, one of the reasons, I wanted to speak to you anyway, was we did a wonderful tasting with yourself and your whisky club, the Scottish Gantry have. Could you explain a little bit about your business, first and foremost, and where it started, why you started it? And it must be a lot of people's dream to run a whisky shop, but I bet it's not as easy as all that. So just paint the picture.
Yeah, so we started in Stirling. Primarily, I owned a small shopping centre in Stirling and wanted to bring into the shopping centre some tourist traffic. And the obvious way to do that is in Scotland through whisky. And at the time, I also had an interest in a brand which I still own, which is a whisky liqueur. So whisky was always something that I was very, very interested in. In consequence of everything that we've done here within Stirling, we then opened up the Stirling Whisky Society. And that was the tasting that you joined. We've now got in excess of 200 members, and we've grown the business fairly recently, tail end of last year, opening up in Milngavie. We don't just carry whisky; we carry all sorts of other spirits and wines, fine wines. But my real passion is whisky.
What year are we talking about, Kevin? When you go back to when you started, you thought there'd be enough interest in whisky. I know there's other liquids there, but when did that all kick off? What year are we talking?
I met a guy called John Smith, who was the master blender at the time at Glenmorangie, and that was about 15 years ago. And that really triggered my interest in whisky, speaking to John, hearing his stories, and it all developed from there to the point where now we're even now doing some of our own bottlings. We buy casks, we bottle those casks, and we've recently acquired a small interest in a business called Dram Tubes, which is a sampling business which is designed to let people taste whiskies that they might otherwise not be able to afford.
I love that. It's a great idea. Count me in. I think that's wonderful. Now, when you're setting up a shop, you want people to come in and buy. This podcast is called Whisky Unscripted. How do you go about A, getting people in the shop, and B, do you set the shop up so it's easy to buy, as it were? Is there trick of the trade, or what's your art?
Well, our shops are slightly different in the sense that the look and feel of the shops is very kind of Victorian. We display the products on antique furniture, and more often than not, we get people coming in asking to buy the furniture as well as the whiskies. But our ethos is also, where possible, to allow people to sample before they buy, so that if somebody's coming in and asking about a whiskey or wanting to buy a whiskey, if we have a sample bottle, we'll let them try it. And that's worked very, very well for us.
That's what they say about the high street. You've opened up a shop in the middle of the pandemic, and during that year, the high street has tumbled down, and that's how they say recovery will happen, by giving people experiences in the high street. You can't just be a replica of an online shop. You've got to do something else, and that sounds like you were onto it years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you said, you used the word experience there, Gordon, and that's what people want. So people will come into the shop, they'll taste stuff, but at the same time, we might be sitting there with 4, 6, 12 people round a table. I'm telling them about various whiskies, telling them about Scotland, the history of whisky in Scotland, how whiskey's made, etc. And it's definitely the way forward. It works, it engages with people, and touch wood, thus far we've had very good reviews on what we've been doing.
You absolutely have, Kevin. So the power of stories, I wholeheartedly agree. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of whiskies. When you set out, are there certain bankers that you can put on your shelves and you think that'll get people coming in the doors and get selling? So just outline some of the whiskies that do well for you, or have done.
Well, I mean, obviously, one of the things that we do work with is the local distilleries. Glengoyne being an obvious one, Deanston being the other. So we're very, very keen to promote local. And what we're also finding within this pandemic is that local is very much the theme of the day, with people wanting to shop local and buy local. But there are obvious bankers like Macallan, Bruichladdich, Springbank, which to many people, and I would tend to agree, is potentially the new Macallan. So many Springbanks being collectible nowadays. But you've got new distilleries coming on board, Ardnamurchan. There's huge demand for their products. And what we're also seeing more and more is the independent bottlers, and people are interested in seeing what the independent bottlers are doing, because they're doing certain things that are different. They're not all great, don't get me wrong. There are some not so good ones out there, but there are some that are pretty hot.
It's really good to hear, because one of the themes in maybe the past has been, I don't want to use the word snobbery, but it's been a certain perception that whiskey is not changed, it's a bit stuffy, and people that drink it are set in their ways. But as you say, with these new distilleries, the interest seems to be there, and people are looking for something new. So has the consumer changed in your eyes since you started getting into whiskey? Am I right saying we were a wee bit stayed?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's this question that's always asked: should you put water in your whiskey? What can you put in your whiskey? In our view, in the Scottish Gantry, you can put into whiskey whatever you want, because at the end of the day, you're the person that's drinking it, you're the person that's consuming it, and you're the person that wants to enjoy it. So if you want to put something that's odd into it, then that's up to you, that's fine. The first whiskey I ever worked with was in conjunction with John Smith, was developing a liqueur, and we decided to put strawberries into it, and that transformed into Fraser liqueur, which is now an extremely well-selling liqueur throughout the UK. But what we are definitely seeing is we're seeing more people who are looking at whiskey not just from a consumption point of view, but from the collectible aspect. And seeing whiskey as a currency, as a pension. We've got one guy in our Whiskey Society who's made, well over £200,000 on uplift on whiskey values in a very, very short space of time. The guy's not even 30 yet, so it's a good place to put your money.
It certainly is. And that Whisky Club, just tell us a little bit more about it. What tastings have you done? You did a wonderful one with Glengoyne, and there was a bit of Tamdhu. I think a really handsome bloke you get in that night with Danielle. I don't know how you afforded them, but excellent work. But who else have you had in?
They were definitely an expensive duo, those two. But the distilleries, we tend to focus on the mainstream distilleries. So, Glengoyne, Bruichladdich, anything from Islay always goes down an absolute storm. We've had Dalmore, we've had Glendronach. Anything that Billy Walker has been involved in is always a quick seller. But I mean, we're actually seeing that as quick as we can put the tickets out for the events that they're selling. 24
These are
hours
online, Kevin. These are the ones that have been online. We've all had to pivot a little bit to the online world, so that's been, I suppose, an unexpected success.
An unexpected success, and in many respects, something of a lifesaver for a lot of businesses like ours, because there just is no footfall, as we know, on the high street at the moment. So I suppose it's true that only in the west of Scotland would an off-licence be deemed as an essential service, but that's what the First Minister has decided we are, and so we are open, but there's not many people out there. So what we're seeing is more purchases online and more people getting involved in our Zoom tastings.
Oh, it's the Zoom tastings, and if you've not done one, can anyone join up to the Scottish Gantry? Can we just go online and become a member?
Yeah, just check out the Scottish Gantry website, thescottishgantry.com. That gives you details of everything that we're doing there.
Okay, Kevin, I've walked into your shop, a couple of my mates as well, whether it's the Stirling one or the Mulgai one, and you must tell me what it's like opening up in the middle of a pandemic, but tuck that to the side. Give us maybe 4 or 5 ones that we would taste that would give us a real overview of Scotch whisky in your eyes, for you.
Well, we would always try and push local. So again, Deanston and Glengoyne are ones that we're always keen to push. I'm a big fan of Bruichladdich. So again, we will push Islay whiskies.
What's any good age there, Kevin? Bruichladdich? What you push us towards an age or a certain?
I mean, one of the things I always like to do is to take people who have said that they're not interested in peaty whiskey, smoky whiskey, and I will quite often slip them an Octomore, the peatiest, smokiest whiskey in the world, highest ppm level up at 309 for the 8.3 Octomore edition. And the reaction that you get from these people is quite phenomenal. So I always like to go down that route. I like to Springbank, again, a favourite distillery of mine. But things like Balvenie, if somebody's not really tried whiskey before, a Balvenie or a Glen Scotia, something nice and soft. These are the type of whiskies. And again, as I've said, the independents. Companies like North Star, based over in Strathblane, are doing some great stuff. Ardnamurchan, who we spoke about prior to coming online, they're doing some terrific stuff. And as quickly as we get their stock in, it literally flies off the shelf.
That's fantastic. And just quickly, what was it like? The decision to open up in the middle of all this lockdown business, that was brave, I would imagine, and there'd been a lot of late nights.
Yeah, I mean, some people would say brave, some people would say ridiculously stupid. However, we prior to Christmas, you know, the run up to Christmas was good. December was good. And then, of course, the lockdown came on 26th of December. So like all other off licenses, we lost a lot of trade from 26th December. And that's continued through. But it's a kind of perfect storm scenario at the moment. You've got lockdown, you've got dry January. But it is what it is just now. We will get through it. Once we've all been vaccinated, I'm quite sure things will come back to normal. Absolutely.
Kevin, I could talk all night, and I just have to say, thoroughly enjoyed your quiz. There's just for those that are listening, Kevin finished the online tasting with a quiz, and there was prizes given out as well. You love a good quiz. Any good questions up your sleeve?
Well, what we try to do with the online tastings is to make them a bit more interesting. And I don't like them to be too heavy. Yeah, everybody wants to know about the whiskies that they're tasting. It's important that we engage with the brand so that the company who we're doing the tasting with, the distillery, gets the opportunity to get their message out to the people participating. But it's also important to have a bit of fun, because that's what whiskey's about. It's about having fun. It's about community. It's about sharing. You know, it's just a great thing to be involved with.
You don't need to say any more, Kevin. That's exactly why I thought I must get you on to the podcast, because everything you've said there encapsulates what we think here on the podcast. And I think with Ian Macleod, it's without the fun element there and the community, it's not quite the same, put it that way. So, Kevin, anything else before we head off? Would you like to?
No, I would just like to, wish everybody a happy and a healthy 2021. The best way to deal with this virus is to keep communicating with each other, and the best way to communicate with each other is with a dram in your hand.
It really is. It really is. Kevin Moore of Scottish Gantry, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll hopefully do this again. Slainthe var.
Slainthe var.
Very interesting. And I guess, I think coming on to the way the world is now, and you look at how things have changed, it's a very different marketplace now, isn't it?
Well, he said he's got Brexit. He's also got the January, dry January as well. It's quite difficult at the moment, but if you keep on offering, and I'm really I think we all are, experiences in the shop and getting people in to taste the liquids and taste the whiskey and a bit of chat, that's how the high street can get through. But can we ask, speaking of getting through the last year of pandemics, how has this COVID situation been for the sales? How you conduct yourself?
I think for me, certainly, Gordon, it's our job, as Danielle said earlier on, prior to COVID, was dealing with the on-trade an awful lot, as well as sort of individual, maybe whiskey specialist shops. But obviously the on-trade has been closed most of the time through this situation. So a lot of our business and a lot of our dealings has been with the independent retailers, which has been great. It's given us a chance to focus on them and give them support. So we're not leaving home, really. We're doing everything by Zoom calls or Teams calls, as we call it. We're doing trainings with them, for instance, getting guys like yourselves involved, getting customers sent, or their customers sent sort of tasting kits and for, let's say, Glengoyne or Tamdhu, and so we're doing things that way with them. So it has changed. We're not out and about in the cars, if you like, going to see people. We're doing everything remotely at the moment. So I miss the face-to-face, if I'm totally honest with you, but we have to. It is what it is, yeah.
Well, and I know Danielle, knowing the type of person Danielle is, she'll be missing the face-to-face chatting and all that as well. That's very much your thing, isn't it? That's why you do what you do.
Yeah. Just had this conversation literally 2 days ago. It just really frustrated, because that's when you're going through that door, a lot of these people you've known for a long time, and you're asking, how are you? And yes, we've got Glengoyne, we've got Tamdhu, we've got Smokehead. So getting out there and speaking to people, I love that. That is my forte. I'm not good behind a laptop. I'm not good with technology.
You're not bad, Danielle.
We're going to do it that way. They didn't have computers when we were at school.
I found the on-off button the other day as well. Yeah.
So, Danielle, can I ask this to you and Dougie? What have you heard? What's happening out there? Obviously, the specialist retail shops are still opening, but are we seeing, well, what is the situation with some of the restaurants and some of the other places that stock the whiskey? Are they going to come back?
Well, we hope so, don't we, Dougie?
Totally. Some are doing deliveries, Gordon, you know, as best they can, you know, maybe cocktail deliveries, you know, but there was a spell there that you could come and, you know, pick your drink and maybe something to eat up from these places and then take them home. But I think with the stay-at-home message, it's really difficult to justify that now. So, yeah, we're all hoping, obviously. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's get people vaccinated and back to some kind of normality, hopefully in the next few months. But I think it might start with outdoor drinking, but who knows? Who knows?
They're saying that the bigger guys are saying October. The bigger guys are saying April. That's the kind of date they've got working towards at the moment. But as we know, nobody's got a crystal ball, so we're just kind of gearing up as much as we can. And I mean, we've got a great marketing team, and what we've got is a lot of things in the back burner. So when the big green button does get pressed, we're going to have some party, I tell you.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think we have got some really nice things up our sleeve as well in terms of new products, which always help and engage retailers and things like that. But and we just want to, you know, we know it's been a really hard time for the hospitality industry. We've got a lot of friends who work in it, and we just hope it gets back to a semblance of normality as soon as possible. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, it's, you know, and the funny thing is, you know, I'm very similar. I mean, my role is, as you know, getting out around the world and talking about our brands. And, you know, we're trying to do things in different markets where, you know, I mean, America's a prime example where there's so much scope for us to do something despite tariffs, which I still can't believe are on our whiskies over there. You know, but even moving alcohol around in sample is really, really difficult around the US, and everywhere seems to, you have to try and break down walls and do things. But you know, we're sort of getting there. We're still selling our brands and we're still doing okay. But we just want the place to be back to some sense of normality. I think would be great.
Well, let's cheer. Let's get a positive frame of mind. And I wish I could sing the Whitney song, "One Moment in Time," you know, or "My Perfect Moment." But I will spare you all my perfect moment. But I'd love to hear. Just it takes the happy place when you think.
He's been on ITV1 for 3 minutes, and he's now singing Whitney.
It's gone to the old bonds, Gordon. Gone to the old bonds, which is Scott's head. It was a perfect moment in whiskey. We love to hear these when you look back, and it's just a lovely, and that'll cheer us all up.
Yeah.
Want to go first, Dougie?
Well, go for it, Danielle. Yep.
Okay, we'll go with one that's not X-rated, right? What time is it? No, it's not. It's not after 9 o'clock yet.
I'm too young.
You should do an X-rated podcast. How's that?
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, yes.
Whiskey
It wouldn't be long enough.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously I collect a wee bit of whiskey, and lucky in the trade that you get to know everybody, and you get to obviously have some nicer bottles that you would normally have. And I remember I was counting them, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And I was with my fiance, and they were saying, "Come on, we'll bring down this, you know, I've got them in a big plastic tub. Come on, we'll bring that tub down from the attic, just see what we've got." You know, it was a Sunday morning. I think we were probably still a bit hungover. And it's a great idea. Let's go and bring the big plastic tub down. So we brought it down. And as soon as it opened the first tub, there's a couple of tubs up there. And I got this waft of whiskey. And I was like, oh no, there's something leaking in there. And I'm thinking, and I knew what was in this particular tub, and I'm going through the bottles, and not that one, right? It's not that one. And I get to Glenfarclas 40-year-old that I purchased. No, not cheap. And I'm looking at it, and I picked it up, and there was the big brown stain around the top of it. Got it open. I'd left it, but schoolboy error. I'd left it on its side.
Never leave your whiskey on the side.
I know. I mean, how stupid was I? Eating into the cork. I looked at my fiancé Carl, and I went, well, we may as well just continue the party. So we sat in our pajamas on a Sunday morning, and we drank Glenfarclas 40-year-old because it was leaking anyway. So I thought we'll just open it.
Oh, praise the Lord, that's fabulous.
Best Sunday ever.
Pairs really well with toast and scrambled eggs.
What an excuse! Any excuse. Oh, that's marvellous. That's a great memory. Dougie, I'm thinking you've got a rugby ball under your arm and you have a wee swing just as you push it down to beat the All Blacks. That'd be...
Well, it's funny you should say that, Gordon, because there was one time out in Christchurch in New Zealand in '87 when that was the first Rugby World Cup. I was lucky enough to be playing in that, and we played the All Blacks in the quarter-final. Unfortunately, they beat us. But that night, the whiskey was flowing, and we had some almighty knees up. Basically, one of the guys in the Scotland backup squad suggested, "Guys, what's the point? Why go home? Anybody fancy staying out for the rest of the tournament?" It developed, but basically what happened was we got given an extra week paid for by the Scottish Rugby Union, but we didn't stay in New Zealand. We went out to America, and we ended up in Disneyland over in America, going around all the rides there for a week, and that was all in the back of this big party when the whiskey was flowing. So it
initially started as let's stay for the rest of the tournament, but you all woke up and went, stuff that, let's go to Disneyland.
Yeah, and basically I can't remember which of the players decided that, but half the guys went to Disneyland, and to be fair, half of them did go home because, as we said, we didn't get paid in those days for playing rugby, and they had to go back to their jobs. But not one of them stayed on for the rest of the tournament. So a bit different, but good days. Yeah.
And I'd like to point out that Scotland lost to New Zealand in the quarter-final. New Zealand went on to win the tournament, so they lost.
Lost the winners. We've just got a couple of after we've done our perfect moments, Gordon. We've got a couple of Whisky Unscripted. It's just tick. And we started last week the history of whisky in 10 objects. I brought out tartan trousers last week to symbolise the tourist industry that's built up around the distillery and the whisky industry. What object could you bring to? And Dougie and Danielle have got to discuss it and say if it's in or not. So, Gordon, have you got something?
I have, and I think this. Actually, when you actually think about how whiskies, when you see things on Facebook about tastings, or you see things on adverts or whatever, this shape glass, I think, has had a lot to do with whiskey in the last 20 years. This is a Glencairn glass. This particular one has some Auchentoshan, but it's a Rosebank glass. For me, this glass has had a transformational effect on whiskey in the last 20 years. So I'm going to pitch it to you both. Would you agree or disagree? All three of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Thumbs up.
Yeah?
I think so as well. Good. If you go back to, we had Paul Davison from the Glencairn Company on the podcast. I think it was season 2, I think it was. Yeah. So you can listen to him as well. But it's just, where would it be without the Glencairn glass?
I think that's true. And you now look at all the other glasswares that you can get. I know, Gordon, you've had an interesting experience with the Norland glass. Why don't you reshare that story again? That's
a mute point. Yes, it was a birthday present, and I fell asleep not once but twice in front of Netflix and let the glass slip out my hand as I was watching Netflix. Smashed.
£25 each, these glasses.
I kept the box though, so my wife thought there was actually glasses in the carton for about 3 months. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my point about this glass is I think it has had a transformational effect, but my point is it should not determine whiskey, this glass. It is a whiskey glass that's great for discovering a whiskey, but when I'm actually drinking whiskey at home, I probably use more of a glass like this.
Yes.
I don't really. But my point would be, that was a pint glass if you were listening. My point would be, you should drink whiskey in any glass you want. It can be mixed in a tall glass. It can be, but that glass has had a big impact, I think, on the whiskey, positive impact on the whiskey industry.
It has, but maybe not as much as Gordon's tartan trousers from last week's episode.
No, maybe not. I think, fair point.
But I've done a few tastings, and you've asked people, how long has this glass been in existence? And some people say the 1970s, some people say it was around about the 1700s. Actually, 2001 was when it first premiered at Whisky Live in London. So it is younger than you think, but it's really been what a success story for a lovely Scottish company. Great. I don't
fantastic.
We're almost ready to wrap up. Gordon, any last order of business?
No, the only thing that we haven't really looked at this week, and we'll look at it in depth in the next episode, is the news. I think we need to catch up on the world of whiskey news. I can't think anything caught your eye in the last week or two, Danielle or Dougie?
You put us on the spot there, Gordon.
I know. That's because I haven't researched the news this week. I thought I'd ask you.
No, I read an old article, but it was just the end of last year, about a wall in America that had stored Prohibition whiskey, and they'd only uncovered it end of the year. So the whiskey was from the late 1920s bourbon, stuffed in a wall that was demolished. So we'll get maybe more into that story and see where that whiskey's heading to.
I can tell you another quick whiskey moment story from my perspective. I was in Chicago in a bar about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's called Delilah's, a very famous bar in North Chicago. Freezing cold outside in January. I met a friend of mine who's not a whiskey drinker particularly, who was working about 30 miles away. He came in a car and we met up and had a drinking. And Mike Miller, who owns the bar, who's won numerous awards for his bar, I'm a good friend of Mike Miller's, and he was pouring us pre-Prohibition bourbon. And for me, that's amazing. But for somebody who doesn't particularly drink whiskey, he was absolutely flabbergasted that he was being poured whiskey that was from the 1920s,
I love that
Prohibition bourbon, and he just said it was one of the most amazing experiences he's ever had. Just incredible. And so a little bit of pre-Prohibition.
I love that
whiskey chat.
I love that. Just I'm just trying to think, just squeeze the last bit out of these guys. You've got the Smokeheads, you had the Tamdhu there, Dougie and Danielle. I don't know if you have to have your letter start with D, Dundas and Dallas, but it might help if you ever come for a job at Ian Macleod. I'm not too sure. All the Ds. But recommending another whiskey, what would you have tonight? If you want to leave us with, it doesn't need to be one of ours. It could be any whiskey you would like. What's maybe your top one, top two?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I enjoy highballs. That was how maybe I was introduced to whiskey initially, and I'm going to stick with one of our brands, Glengoyne. I think the 12-year-old that we do is fantastic. The mixture of sherry and bourbon. So that with touch of soda water. I like a squeeze of lime in mine as well, to be honest with you. Nice, long, refreshing drink. Even though I'm saying that, I'm looking outside here. There's snow on the ground outside, but at the same time, I think it's maybe a summery type drink, but I think you can drink it any time round. Really refreshing drink. So that's what I think.
Danielle?
Well, seeing as it's nearly the weekend, we would normally get a wee takeaway to treat ourselves, because it's the weekend. You need something to treat yourself, don't you, with this? Mm-hmm. And my little treat would be a special fish supper with a pickled onion. Now, the best thing to have with a special fish supper is not an iron brew. No, it would be an Ardbeg Ugadal.
Oh, God, you do love the Islas, don't you?
There's nothing like an Isla single malt to me. That smell and you're just peat. It's the peat. I love it. So that would be my top tip. Would be an Ugadal with. It's got to be a special fish supper. Can't be the batter. It's got to be the breaded one.
The breadcrumbs. Nice. Nice.
Fantastic mix.
I love
Just
all
for
that.
anybody who's not from Glasgow or Edinburgh, if you ask for fish supper, you get a battered bit of fish and some chips.
Should we explain that?
You ask for breaded, it's like asking for the special fish.
Yes. I'm taking wee notes. I'm writing it down for a wee food special coming up soon, Gordon.
food special. We'll get Danielle back on for their fish supper.
That's the end of the business of Whisky Unscripted episode 2. We're off and running in series 3. Can I just thank you, Dougie Wylie? Thank you so much for joining us, and Danielle Murphy. Thank you for joining us. And Gordon Dundas, I'll leave you the last word.
Well, all I would like to say is it's a pleasure that Mr. Dallas has decided to turn down all the offers that he's got as a result of his star appearance for 3.2 minutes on ITV. I know that he's zero running in, and we're looking forward to coming back with episode 3. Just drop us a line. Anything you want us to talk about, we will. But we just felt it was a good time to bring in 2 professionals to give us their view on the market. So signing off with my Auchentoshan. Thank you very much.
Yes,
and
thank you.
Cheers,
Slainthe.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.